How long were you in the Met Police, Peter?
21 years.
20. And what was it that made you step down from there?
Well, unfortunately, towards the end of my police career, I had to very hurriedly move into the witness protection program. So I had to abandon my home, my identity, my life as I knew it, and all of that. And I had a very miserable couple of years.
Are you allowed to say what your name was then and everything? Or when you
I'm not going to give the name that I lived under when I was in witness protection. But it was a particularly dark period in my life.
And what? Because you hear about witness protection and all of this, but so what do they actually do? So something happens that means that you're in danger. How long after that decision is made to get you into witness protection do you actually end up in there?
Well, I got the phone call. I was driving home one night from work, and it was a rare thing. It was kind of like we'd had a fairly early finish. It was about 7, 8 o'clock at night. And I'm driving home and I'm thinking, lovely, I can go to the pub, have a pint, just relax. And I got a phone call from one of my bosses at Scotland Yard. And he said, don't go home, right? Use one of your false identities, because I was working undercover. Move into a hotel tonight. Be here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll tell you what it's all about. And I'm like, right, okay. Rang the girlfriend. She had to pack an overnight bag. And then we met at the hotel a bit later on. I didn't go to the yard at 9 o'clock the following morning. I got there before 8 o'clock. Obviously,
you want to know,
like, what's going on?
Yeah.
A colleague of mine locked me in a side room with a copy of the report that had actually been stolen from a police officer's car, which detailed my name and my full involvement in a very complex and dangerous
I understand. So documents
operation
that outlined you as Peter and what you'd been doing in an investigation got stolen, which therefore compromised your security, your identity, and so a decision was taken to put you into witness protection.
In a nutshell, yes.
And then
by the close of play that day, the decision had been taken by the Scotland Yard bosses that I had to move into witness protection. So I was temporarily housed in a hotel. I then had a choice of 3, I think it was, or 4 properties that my girlfriend then went and looked at. We chose one of those, the least worst option. It was frankly uninhabitable at the time, so the builders had to come in very hurriedly and knock it into shape.
And do you have to sort that out, or do the Met say, actually, you know what, we can see this as uninhabitable? I mean, it sounds ridiculous to ask these logistics, but, you know, what happens?
Essentially, I was organising the builders.
And do you have to pay for that? Or
No.
No, phew. All right, well, that's something.
That was paid for by the taxpayer. Yeah, and within a couple of weeks, we'd moved out of the hotel and I moved into this new home with my new name, my new identity.
And is it difficult? I suppose you're trained at doing it, but is it difficult to remember your new name and not to slip into giving your old name? I mean...
Well, the ludicrous part of it was I was still expected to work. So not only am I living undercover permanently in one kind of identity, so I come downstairs in the morning, there's the mail on the doormat, okay? So that just confirms the identity I'm living in. That's who I am, right? I then walk out the front door, get in the car, having checked that there's not a device underneath it. Get in the car.
Yes, of course.
Get in the car, drive to work. And actually, during that drive to work, I can be myself for an hour or two. I can put the radio on and actually be myself. But then the minute I arrived at work, one of the bosses would say, we've got an undercover job for you. And off I go in yet another identity. Wow. So one day, I'd be at least 3 different people.
And when you go into witness protection, are you... allowed to go to your house and get anything, or does someone do that for you to get all your personal belongings? And because, you know, if anyone ever tried to whip me into witness protection, I'd be like, oh my God, but, you know, I've left the hob on, and oh no, I've got to go back home, and it would completely defeat the object of witness protection, because I'd be too anxious of not packing everything.
Well, sufficient security measures were taken so that each end of the road was taken care of.
So you could go and move out.
So I then went with members of my team to my house, of course, which I hadn't been to for a week or more, and literally everything had to be boxed up, a van arrived, and all of that. But of course, my colleagues thought it was utterly hilarious going through the minutiae of my life.
Of course.
Of what they found.
No privacy there.
Yeah, they thought it was great fun. I was a bit more preoccupied, and I didn't quite see the humour in all of that. I accepted it, but for me, this wasn't anything remotely funny.
So not a time for joking.
Well, there
we
you
found
go.
the time not
There
for
you
joking.
go. There you go.
Sorry,
They
I don't
certainly
mean
had
to
a-
laugh.
No,
You'll
that's
make
fine.
You'll make a joke out of hideous murders, but not
yeah.
if I move in house. No way. What happens to your house? So you've moved all your stuff out. Do they rent it out then, or how does that work? Or does it just sit empty?
No,
Or?
that eventually got sold.
And do you have to have it? But I'm saying, what is that something that you have to do, or is there an option, say, when it's safer, that you can go back to your old house?
No,
or if once you've gone into witness protection, you can never go back to your old house?
Yeah, no, we had to sever all ties with that, and there kind of had to be a full stop achieved with regards to Peter Bleksley.
And what about family? Are you allowed to contact your members of your family?
Well, that was very difficult, of course, because I still had my mum, and my sister and her family, and of course I was father to my first son, who was born out of wedlock, but I saw, every weekend and during the week and all of that. So safe to say that I maintained contacts with my family, but it was very, very challenging, and there were security measures put in place that none of my family ever knew about.
And can you say without being too specific, what sorts of things? So are you saying that you had officers sort of also keeping an eye on them and things like that, maybe?
When I was pushing my son on the swings, we were not alone.
Get it? Gosh, that's good, but what a palaver! What a life! I mean, imagine that you move into your new home that you love, and you could be thinking to yourself, "Well, I've got to move out in 6 months because and I can never come back again."
Yeah, and I dealt with it badly. I drank too much, smoked too much, and eventually had a complete meltdown and ended up in a lock-in psychiatric ward.
Really? And do you think it was the stress of going into witness protection and all those undercover identities that drove you to that?
It was indeed, yeah.
And what did they say would stop that? I mean, was it that they suggested, look, the only way you're actually going to get free of this is to leave the service?
Well, the psychiatrist that was treating me said, if ever you want to get well and stay well, you will have to go back to being Peter Bleksley with any of the associated risks. You cannot be all these multiple identities any longer. Something has to stop. And so essentially that kissed goodbye to my undercover career. It kind of made large parts of my policing career untenable, and essentially it was the beginning of the end.
Tell me about the so you had that sort of issue. Firstly, by the way, that was the question I had. Was it safe for you to be Peter Bleksley by the time you were Peter Bleksley again?
Yeah, well, eventually there was a risk assessment done when I decided to go public, write my autobiography, and do all of that. And the Met said we see no current credible threat. So
now you found a story about because obviously this all ties in, especially when we're thinking, which I think isn't considered very much, actually, the mental health of officers. And of course, with fewer officers on the streets, the workload's going up, more crime as a result of that. Many officers will be very, very welcoming to this idea of 20,000 more police, and the chair of Police Federation has been saying something about that, haven't they?
Yes, today in the Daily Express there's a two-page spread, an interview with John Apter, the chair of the Police Federation, and there's also a column by a comment piece by Nick Adderley, who's the Chief Constable of Northamptonshire Police, and he has vowed to arm all of his frontline officers with a taser, and I would say absolutely hurrah to that. I hope that every Chief Constable in the land follows his lead, and that all frontline officers are armed, because they are doing a very, very dangerous and challenging role on behalf of all of us. They are the protectors. If it wasn't for them, where on earth would we be?
Would a taser be enough? I mean, if you're facing someone with a gun potentially or another weapon, is a taser, again, I need you to educate me on this because I'm not overly familiar, but is a taser as effective? Can you fire a taser from a distance and it hits them? With
Yes, but you can't fire it from 40 yards away.
No, but it's nearby. But if we're a few feet from each other and I want to get you with it, I can.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And are they effective in keeping officers safe in your experience?
They are very effective. Not only the discharging of the taser, but the red dot that appears on you when the officers point it in your direction and prepare to shoot has calmed many, many situations.
What does it actually do? When you are tased, obviously it looks like a very unpleasant experience and you look slightly incapacitated, but have you ever been tased? Do you know what it actually does to you?
No, I most certainly haven't.
I didn't mean that you were arrested, but perhaps, accidentally or something happened. But what does it do to a person?
No, well, it fires tens upon tens of thousands of volts into you, and essentially it utterly incapacitates you. There have, unfortunately, been some tragic situations where people have gone into heart failure and have died as a result of it, but they are very, very small in numbers. And at the end of the day, we are talking about not only protecting the police, but we're talking about protecting the public as well. And the red dot, which appears as the officer prepares to discharge the weapon, has on many, many occasions proved sufficient and has helped to defuse situations.
Do you think that there's an argument to arm more officers, or do you think that that would lead to actually more guns on the side of criminals, therefore almost defeating the object and making it less safe for everyone?
There are more police officers carrying guns now than there certainly were back in the day when I had a pink ticket, as we called it, and you could go to the station sergeant and say, "Can I book out a gun, please, Sarge?" And back in the day, when I had it was a revolver.
Oh,
that's how old I am. However, a fully armed police service with every officer in the land carrying a gun, I am utterly against. Putting another 100,000 or more firearms onto the streets of the UK is not going to make the place safer. There are many, many officers who wouldn't want to do that. There are some who will carry a taser but don't want to carry a gun. And so you would lose a number of valuable officers because they quite simply would not want to be forced into doing that.
That's interesting. That you would imagine that someone in the police service, if they were told to carry a gun, that they'd be very confident, they'd want to do that. Why are some officers against carrying a gun?
Because so many officers join the service to protect life and not to take a life. And that essentially, I think, would be the thinking behind many officers' reasons to refuse that, and consequently might find that policing is not a job for them. Now, if we look over the pond to America, you will also find that there have been, sadly, many occasions when armed officers have got into close combat with somebody, hand-to-hand kind of fighting, only for them to have their gun ripped from them, and they then become
end up being
the
shot
victim
by their own
of a
gun.
shooting.
Wow.
Yeah, there's many reasons why we should not have a fully armed police service.